Mr Mayor, I want to start by saying on behalf of the Green Group, I really welcome the strategy's ambition to improve access and particularly participation in culture and the arts for all Londoners. And also the ways that you've interlinked this strategy with all your other strategies so it's not sitting in a silo. And I particularly welcome your adoption of the Cultural Inclusion Manifesto to improve access to the arts for people with disabilities. And on a personal level, in terms of workspace, as a former practicing artist, I'm really excited to see the work of the Creative Land Trust and look forward to seeing how this develops over time and whether it can provide affordable workspace for creative Londoners in perpetuity. But I want to ask you now a bit about the Good Work Standard.
Yes.
There's no detail of the final Good Work Standard available, but both your economic development strategy and culture strategy refer repeatedly to it. And when I questioned you recently, you said you were soft launching the Good Work Standard during 2018 to get businesses signed up with a bigger launch next year. So I want to know, how's the soft launch going and how many creative and cultural institutions and companies have signed up to the Good Work Standard so far?
Thank you for your comments and your question. So the beta testing was supposed to begin in December. That may not begin now till January. That's what I mean by soft launch. That's when you sort of soft launch it, iron out the problems, get people involved. So the latest, I asked this question yesterday, the beta testing hasn't begun. I think it'll begin in January. Can I, Chair, after this session, just contact your office to let you know when we think it's going to begin in January. I'm very happy for you to be involved in relation to that.
That would be great, and if you can provide an update on...
We'll speak offline, but I think it's pushed back to January, but I'll let you know definitively after this meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. So also, in my response to your draft strategy, I asked you to include more information about how the Good Work Standard will address poor pay and, I quote, the pockets of bad practice amongst creative employers across the capital, end quote, that you had rightly identified as an issue.
Yeah.
Now, you've removed the phrase about pockets of bad practice from the final strategy, but your new nighttime economy data that we discussed the other day showed that over half the people working in culture and leisure industries at night are paid less than the London living wage. So there are still some pretty big pockets of bad practice out there. So how are you going to address these areas of bad employment practice amongst companies who are not signed up to the Good Work Standard in the creative and cultural sector?
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do, and this is in answer to a question that Gareth Bacon asked earlier on about the role of the night side, is her ability to bring people together and persuade them the benefits of signing up to a charter or becoming a Good Work Standard employee is really important. And all the evidence is somebody who treats their employees well has increased productivity, better issues in relation to recruitment, retention and progression, less days off sick, etc. One of the problems in relation to the nighttime economy is not simply that 500,000 Londoners earn below the living wage, but some of them are self-employed, and so there are challenges in relation to what the Good Work Standard can do. You'll be aware we can't force an employer to be a Good Work Standard employer, but we can use carrots by naming and praising those that are, and by default those that aren't Good Work Standard employees, and the consumer knows this. Already I've written to, whether it's cinemas or others, to encourage them to be good employers. We all know about the well publicised cases of cinemas not paying their staff the living wage, and I've written to them. I'll be praising those who are good employers, and I think that way we can try and raise the standards in London. You know, it's not good enough that many of us pay huge amounts of money to go to a theatre or to a piece of culture, and the staff who work in those places are getting paid bad salaries and stuff. That's why it's important we as consumers do our best as well to put pressure on the cultural providers.
Thank you. And beyond that, there's one other area, which is GLA procurement.
Yes.
In my response to your strategy in June, I urged you to make payment to the London living wage a stated condition for any culture programmes and initiatives that the GLA are directly involved in setting up and commissioning. Now, your response wasn't totally clear, so can I just clarify, will the GLA only commission creative companies or projects that pay their employees, hired or contracted, the London living wage?
Well, I'll let Justin answer that in a second, but just to clarify, as an answer to the question that Peter asked about cultural seeds, many of the groups we fund are volunteers. So we couldn't, strictly speaking, have as a condition of receiving GLA money, everyone must receive the living wage. So some of those schemes, you get £1,000, £2,000, they're not paid. They just
Okay, yes, I get that that's a problem. But if you're commissioning, a performance, something happening in Trafalgar Square, or a sort of big piece of, a big cultural event, which London does very well, do you make the London Living Wage a condition of those kind of events?
I'm going to ask you to defer to Shiona because she does have
Absolutely. So there are. I will try and speak up here. There are two pieces of work that the GLA is doing to look at its own practices at the moment. The one is a new diversity and inclusion action standard that we are all reflecting on, and this is about how we offer an inclusive and responsible environment here at the GLA, and the other is a focus on procurement. So there is a piece of work progressing around the GLA's procurement, the powers and the approach to that. It's not a piece that I'm leading, but I'm sure we could bring an update on that.
That would be very welcome to have a written update. Can I finally just follow up on the Assembly's climate emergency motion from last week? And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for declaring a climate emergency. I just want to know if you've yet thought about the implications of this for the culture strategy. For instance, fossil fuel companies like BP sponsor some big cultural players in London. So what are your thoughts on the GLA working with cultural partners who accept sponsorship from fossil fuel companies?
Well, we've done lots of work in relation to the links between culture and the green industry. I mean, I think Justine with Vivian, talk about some of the schemes we've been doing, Justine.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot actually. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, for example, a few fashion weeks ago, we launched alongside Vivian Westwood a big programme called Switch to Green Energy, which was really successful. A lot of the big department stores and major brands have signed up to that now, and that was a joint initiative between us, the British Fashion Council and Vivian Westwood. And we're doing lots, actually we're doing a lot internationally, in actually taking a lead from the C40, which is that we've got lots to share with cities around the world. And greening the creative industries is the major work programme within the World Cities Culture Forum. And we're looking at what we can learn from each other, how particularly the creative organisations can play a leadership role, but also get our own house in order, and what we can do in terms of our buildings and our infrastructure, how we can jointly procure. All of that kind of shared learning is happening as a major programme at an international level, and London is very much kind of at the heart of that.
Thank you, I'm out of time.
You are indeed.